The sun had long since set, its final rays swallowed by the thick black clouds that hung ominously over the ravaged remnants of the city. Amid the ruins, one figure stood alone, breathing heavily. His name was Ethan, and for the last 3 years he had been the last man on Earth. The world had crumbled, succumbing to the relentless plague that turned people into mindless, flesh-hungry monsters. The initial outbreak had been swift, cities falling within days as chaos spread across the globe. Governments had collapsed, and within weeks, humanity was all but wiped out. Ethan had watched it all unfold from the safety of his makeshift shelter, a fortified building in the heart of a decimated city. He had been one of the few who managed to survive the initial onslaught, but now he was the only one left. It wasn't just the silence that unnerved him. It was the never-ending presence of the undead. They were everywhere, their guttural groans echoing in the night air, their bodies slithering through the streets like a horde of mindless machines. The city had become a tomb, a hollow shell of what it once was, and Ethan was its last living resident. Tonight, however, the air felt different. There was something in the way the wind howled, a tension that sent a chill down his spine. He had learned to trust his instincts in this new world, and they were telling him that something was coming. He couldn't pinpoint it, but his survival depended on him staying alert. He peered through the cracked windows of his shelter, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands. The streets were empty, save for the scattered remnants of abandoned cars and the occasional corpse dragging itself across the pavement. His eyes scanned the area, a sense of dread slowly creeping over him. Then it happened. A loud crash echoed from the alleyway just across the street. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he whirled around, his rifle raised instinctively. For a moment, everything went silent. His breathing was the only sound, steady and measured as he waited. He had been through enough to know that the dead were relentless, but they were also predictable. Another crash, this time closer. Ethan's grip tightened. Slowly, cautiously, he moved to the door, taking one last look around the shelter. He had enough supplies to last for weeks, but he couldn't stay here forever. The horde was growing, and he could feel their presence closing in. This city, this haven, was becoming too dangerous. He opened the door, the creak of the hinges louder than he had intended. He cursed under his breath, but there was no turning back now. The only way forward was through. Ethan stepped out into the cold, dead night. His boots crunched against the broken asphalt, each step carrying him further from safety. The wind howled, carrying with it the distant groans of the undead. The alleyway was shrouded in shadow, but Ethan's eyes were sharp. He didn't know what to expect. What had made that noise? Was it just another group of zombies? Or was it something worse? He had fought zombies before, but tonight there was an unfamiliar weight in the air, as if the city itself was holding its breath. As he crept closer to the source of the noise, he spotted the first sign of trouble. A figure, hunched over and moving erratically, shuffled out of the darkness. It was a human, or at least it had once been. Ethan's stomach churned at the sight of the twisted, decayed face. The creature's eyes, once human, were now nothing more than hollow pits, its skin hanging off its bones in sickening tatters. The figure stumbled forward, letting out a low, unintelligible growl. Ethan raised his rifle, aiming for the head, standard procedure. But before he could pull the trigger, another figure appeared. Then another. In an instant, the alleyway was filled with zombies, their grotesque forms pouring from the shadows like rats. Ethan's heart raced. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was an ambush. Without thinking, he fired, the sharp crack of the rifle breaking the stillness. The first zombie fell, but there were too many. More swarmed in, their hands reaching for him, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Ethan backed up, firing again and again, each shot hitting its mark. But the sheer numbers of the horde were overwhelming. He had to move, and fast. Ethan turned, sprinting down the alley, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The undead followed, their relentless pursuit echoing in his ears. He reached the corner of the street and ducked into a nearby building, slamming the door shut behind him. Inside it was dark, the only light coming from the flickering glow of a broken street lamp outside. The building was eerily quiet, and Ethan's mind raced. What was happening? The zombies had never attacked like this before. There was something different about tonight, something darker, more deliberate. And then he heard it, the sound of footsteps in the hall. He wasn't alone. The darkness outside was alive with the distant moans and shuffles of the undead, but the immediate threat came from within. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as he pressed his back against the crumbling wall of the building, his mind racing. The footsteps he had heard earlier weren't just from zombies. Something else was out there, something that seemed too calculated, too deliberate. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on him, something far more dangerous than the mindless monsters who had once been human. The air in the building was thick with tension, and his senses were on high alert. The footsteps continued, growing louder as they drew closer. Ethan's rifle, which he had gripped tight in his hands, felt heavy with dread. He knew that if he didn't act quickly, he would be trapped. Ethan scanned the room. The building was once a small apartment complex, but now it was a decaying shell, broken windows, scattered debris, the remnants of a life long gone. The walls were cracked, the floor littered with rubble and broken furniture. There were no other exits. The front door was blocked by a stack of overturned furniture, and the back windows were too high to reach without a ladder. His eyes flickered to the dark hallway at the far end of the room. He could feel them, the zombies, shambling ever closer. The unmistakable shuffle of their feet, the low, guttural growls, filled the air. But it wasn't just their presence that unnerved him. It was the strange rhythm of their movement. They weren't just aimlessly wandering anymore. It was like they were following a pattern. He heard the faintest scrape of shoes on the floor, a small noise, but it was enough. Ethan turned just in time to see the first zombie appear at the far end of the hallway. Its face was half-rotten, a grotesque mess of decay and hunger. It stumbled forward, its hands reaching out toward him. But there was something else. Behind the zombie, a shadow moved. A figure emerged from the darkness of the hallway, tall and thin, draped in a long, tattered cloak. It wasn't moving like a zombie. No, it was moving with purpose. A fluidity that was far too controlled for a creature of the dead. Ethan's breath hitched in his throat. This wasn't just any survivor. This was something else. Something dangerous. The figure's head turned toward him, the faint glint of eyes shining through the shadows. The zombies behind it shuffled forward, not in the mindless, chaotic frenzy that Ethan had grown used to, but in slow, deliberate movements, like an army following a commander. The figure raised a hand, and without a sound, the zombie stopped. The air seemed to still for a moment, an eerie calm settling over the room. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to run, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the figure. It was like it had the power to control them, to command them with nothing more than a gesture. The figure took a step forward, and the horde shifted with it, parting like the Red Sea. "Who are you?" Ethan's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. His hands were shaking, the rifle still tight in his grip, but he wasn't sure if he could fire. Not with this thing in front of him. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it stepped closer, the shadows clinging to its form like a cloak of night. Ethan could feel the temperature in the room drop, a chill settling over him as the figure's eyes locked onto his. And then it spoke. "I am the end." The words were soft, almost a whisper, but they reverberated through the air like a death knell. The figure raised its hand again, and the zombies surged forward, their movements now synchronized, like an army under command. Ethan's pulse raced, adrenaline flooding his system. The air was thick with the scent of decay as the creatures closed in. But something was different. They weren't just attacking, they were waiting. The figure stood at the center of the room, watching him with those glowing eyes, its hand still outstretched. Ethan realized too late that this was no ordinary survivor. It was something far more sinister. It was controlling the horde. The zombies closed in on Ethan, their mouths slavering, their eyes vacant and dead. But there was no blind rage in their actions, no wild hunger. They moved with precision, almost as though they were waiting for a signal. Ethan fired. The rifle's blast echoed in the room, the recoil biting into his shoulder as he aimed for the nearest zombie. It dropped to the ground with a sickening thud, but the others didn't flinch. The figure didn't move either, as if the death of one zombie meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. He fired again, and again, but no matter how many zombies he took down, more seemed to fill the gap, as though the horde was endless. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded from above. Ethan's heart leapt into his throat as the ceiling above him groaned and splintered. A moment later, something heavy crashed through the floorboards, sending dust and debris flying. The figure didn't even look up. Ethan barely had time to react as a massive zombie, far larger than the others, tore through the floor, its bloated body crashing down onto the wreckage with a bone-jarring thud. It was a creature of nightmare. Its skin was stretched taut, almost translucent, revealing the muscles and veins beneath. Its eyes were wild, filled with the same mindless hunger that had consumed the world. It let out a guttural roar that shook the building. The figure simply turned and looked at the monster as it approached, its movements slow and deliberate. Ethan, caught between the deadly horde and the giant monster, knew this was no longer just about survival. This was a battle for the very future of humanity itself. The room was filled with the low, rumbling growls of the undead as they surrounded Ethan. But they weren't the immediate threat now. No, that honor belonged to the towering abomination that had just torn its way through the ceiling, its grotesque form now looming over him. It was the size of a bear, but its body was bloated and disfigured, with pale, sagging skin barely clinging to its swollen frame. The stench of decay and rot was overpowering as it snorted and scraped its massive hands against the floor. Its yellow eyes locked onto Ethan, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. The air thickened, heavy with the realization that this beast wasn't just a random zombie. It was something else. Something created for a purpose. And that purpose, Ethan realized, had everything to do with a cloaked figure in the shadows. The horde of zombies, which had been closing in on Ethan only moments ago, paused at the figure's silent command. They stood still, watching the towering monstrosity with a strange reverence. Ethan's stomach churned. This was no accident, no random turn of fate. This was a calculated attack orchestrated by the figure who controlled the zombies. He had thought the zombies were the ultimate threat, but the presence of the hulking monster, combined with the figure's unsettling calm, made it clear that something far more dangerous was at play. Ethan's fingers tightened around his rifle, but he knew he was out of options. His ammunition was running low, and the zombies were closing in from all sides. He couldn't fight them all. Not like this. He had to think, to find a way out. His eyes darted around the room. The walls were cracked, the floor scattered with debris. There had to be something he could use. The giant zombie took a lumbering step forward, its dead eyes fixed on Ethan. Ethan's pulse raced. He had no time left. With a quick glance at the figure, he made a decision. He wasn't going to survive this alone. The cloaked figure didn't seem to notice the growing chaos, nor did it seem to care. Its cold, calculating gaze remained locked on Ethan, like it was watching a fly caught in a web. Its hand remained outstretched, palm facing the ground, as though commanding the very undead that surrounded them. A strange, eerie calm settled over Ethan as he sprinted toward a nearby pile of wreckage, dodging between broken furniture and scattered debris. The monster's enormous arms swung down, but Ethan was already moving, faster than he'd ever moved before. He threw himself into the pile of rubble, searching for anything that could help him. He spotted a metal pipe, half buried under a fallen beam. It was jagged, but it would have to do. He grabbed it, lifting it just as the giant zombie slammed its hand down where he had been a moment before. The ground trembled beneath him. The figure finally spoke, its voice soft yet ominous. "You think you can stop it? Stop them? You are too late." Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he charged at the giant zombie, thrusting the metal pipe at its exposed side. It sunk into the creature's flesh, but it barely seemed to notice. The zombie let out a low growl, its massive hand swinging toward Ethan with terrifying speed. He ducked, rolling out of the way just in time. But the monster was relentless. It swung again, faster this time, its claws scraping the floor with sickening force. Ethan's mind raced. He was running out of time, out of space. He couldn't defeat this monster, not like this. But maybe he didn't have to fight it. Maybe he just needed to survive long enough to get close to the figure. If he could somehow break its control over the zombies, maybe he'd stand a chance. The giant zombie stumbled forward, its foot catching on a piece of debris. In that brief moment of hesitation, Ethan saw his opportunity. He darted past the hulking creature, narrowly avoiding another swipe, and made a beeline for the cloaked figure standing motionless in the shadows. The figure's eyes glowed faintly, its head turning slowly as Ethan approached. It didn't flinch, didn't even seem to care. He was almost there. But just as he reached out to make his move, the ground beneath him shook with a deafening roar. The giant zombie was closing in on him, its gargantuan form blocking his path. There was no escape, no room to maneuver. He was trapped. The figure finally spoke again, its voice dripping with disdain. You cannot escape what is inevitable, human. The world is over. You will fall like the others. Ethan's grip tightened on the metal pipe, his knuckles white with the force. He had one last chance. He spun toward the figure, running at it with everything he had left. The zombies moved to stop him, but he was too fast, too desperate. With a swift strike, he slammed the jagged pipe toward the figure's outstretched arm. But before he could make contact, the air around him seemed to shift, like an invisible force pushing him back. The pipe slammed into something hard, an invisible barrier. The cloaked figure didn't move. It simply stood there, calm, unbothered, as if it had expected this. Ethan fell back, gasping for breath. His head spun with dizziness, his vision blurring. The zombies had stopped moving, frozen in place like puppets waiting for their strings to be pulled. The monster, still towering over him, paused too, its dead eyes fixed on him with a silent, unfeeling stare. You think you can defeat me? The figure asked, its voice now laced with venom. I am the end of mankind. You are nothing more than a fleeting moment in time. Ethan stumbled backward, struggling to stay on his feet. He had been wrong. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something much larger, something far darker than he could have ever imagined. The world he had known was gone, and it was being replaced by something far worse. The figure extended its hand again, and the zombies moved in unison, surrounding him. Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat as the reality of his situation set in. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle for humanity's future. And in that moment, he realized something that sent a chill down his spine. He might be the last human left, but he was up against something far older and far more powerful than any zombie apocalypse. The end had come. The air was thick with a hum of something unnatural, a pulse that reverberated deep in Ethan's chest. He had expected the zombies to be his biggest challenge, but the true enemy, the cloaked figure controlling them, was far more dangerous. He was standing at the precipice of the end, his body bruised and bloodied from the brutal fight, but it wasn't just his physical wounds that threatened to break him. It was the overwhelming sense of hopelessness that clung to him like a heavy shroud. The zombies surrounded him, their vacant eyes glowing eerily in the dim light of the ruined building. The giant abomination stood between him and the cloaked figure, its dead eyes watching him with an emotionless hunger. Ethan's rifle lay on the floor, discarded in the chaos. His makeshift weapon, the jagged metal pipe, felt insignificant in his hands. The cloaked figure's voice sliced through the stillness, cold and commanding. You cannot defeat me, human. This is your world now, one of endless decay. A world where you are nothing more than a remnant of a dying species. Ethan's heart pounded, the weight of those words pressing down on him. There was no fighting this. No conventional weapon that could break the figure's control. He had seen it, felt it. Whatever power it possessed was beyond human comprehension, and with each passing moment, it seemed to grow stronger. The zombies, once mindless predators, were now a weapon in the hands of something far darker. But in that moment of despair, Ethan's mind snapped to something else, a fleeting thought, a spark of clarity. He didn't have to defeat it. He just needed to outsmart it. The figure was powerful, yes, but it was also arrogant. It saw him as nothing more than an obstacle to be crushed. It had underestimated him before, and it would do so again. Ethan's eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything, that could help him. The giant zombie loomed closer, its massive limbs dragging on the ground. Behind it, the cloaked figure stood tall, its gaze fixed on him like a predator watching its prey. And then he saw it. A rusted electrical panel, half hidden behind a pile of debris. Sparks flickered from the exposed wires, a sign of life in the otherwise decayed building. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Ethan knew what he had to do. He sprang into action, not wasting a second. He dashed toward the panel, keeping his movements quick and calculated. The zombies followed, their bodies moving in unnatural synchrony, but the giant zombie, sensing his movement, charged forward, its jaws snapping as it reached for him. Ethan ducked, narrowly avoiding the creature's grasp. He slid behind a large piece of debris, heart racing. The figure didn't seem to care about the chase. It stood motionless, still commanding the zombies to follow Ethan's every move. Its focus was absolute. The arrogance was palpable. And that was exactly what Ethan needed. He reached the panel. His fingers worked fast, trembling as he pulled at the wires. He didn't need to understand the intricacies of the electrical system. All he needed was a spark, a distraction. His hands found a piece of metal and twisted it into the exposed wires. A surge of electricity shot through the circuit with a loud crack, sending a violent jolt of energy into the building. Sparks flew from the panel, illuminating the room in bright flashes. The cloaked figure's eyes widened in shock as the sudden burst of energy reverberated throughout the building. But it didn't move. Instead, it raised a hand, and the zombies froze in place, motionless, as though they were connected to the figure by invisible strings. Ethan didn't wait. He leaped from his hiding spot, sprinting toward the figure, knowing that he only had moments before the figure regained control. He slammed into the cloaked figure with all the force he could muster, knocking it backward. The figure stumbled, caught off guard. For a brief moment, the hold it had on the undead wavered, and in that instant, the zombies faltered, their movements becoming erratic and slow. Ethan's mind raced. This was his chance. With no time to think, he grabbed the figure's cloak and tore it away, revealing what was hidden underneath. The figure wasn't human. It was something older, something ancient. Its skin was mottled in gray, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural light that sent a chill through Ethan's bones. It wasn't just a person controlling the zombies. This was a being, a creature that had existed long before the plague had begun. The creature hissed, its voice a low, guttural growl. "You are a fool. You cannot stop me. This world is mine." But Ethan didn't listen. He wasn't going to let this creature win. Not after everything. Not after all the suffering. He pushed the figure away, stumbling back. And with one final desperate act, he reached for the broken electrical wires, grabbing a live one and pressing it into the figure's chest. Electricity crackled, and the creature screeched, its form convulsing as the surge of power coursed through it. The zombies, still frozen by the disruption, began to shake violently, their once synchronized movements breaking down into chaos. The force of the electric charge overloaded the figure's control, and with a final deafening scream, the cloaked entity collapsed to the ground, its power extinguished. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stood over the creature's lifeless form, his body trembling, sweat pouring down his face. The zombies had stopped moving completely, their vacant eyes locked in place. The giant monster, too, had ceased its pursuit, now standing motionless in the middle of the room. It was over. For now. Ethan's chest rose and fell with each labored breath. He had done it. Against all odds, he had destroyed the figure controlling the Horde. But as he looked around at the broken world, the ruins of humanity scattered before him, he knew this wasn't the end. The zombies were still out there, lurking, waiting for the next command. He wasn't done yet. But for the first time in years, Ethan felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. The world was broken, but there was still a chance to rebuild, to fight back, to take back what was lost. He turned, surveying the wreckage of the city, the silent undead all around him. He was the last human, yes. But he wasn't alone anymore. Not in spirit. He had won this battle, and as long as he still stood, he would fight for the future of humanity. For a new world. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The end. For now,